Are you ready, kids? Get your parents' permission, check your mailbox, and grab your shopping cart. It's time for the Adventures in Collecting podcast.
I'm Erik.
And I'm Dave. Welcome to Adventures in Collecting, where we talk toy news, culture, and hauls,
along with our journeys as collectors. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Adventures in Collecting.
Hello.
I love it. Always bring in the energy.
There it is for everyone. There's the hello.
One of these days, Dave, we're going to do merch, and your shirt is just going to say, hello.
Yeah, my two catchphrases are hello and yeah, so...
So Dave, what am I going to say? Do you want to say it for me, or should I say it this time?
This is your shirt. So Erik, do we have a lead to bury today?
We don't, Dave. I'm not going to bury the lead. We are joined today by a very special guest. We are joined by somebody who has been directly involved with some of the let's just say like legendary toys throughout the years. Jem and the Holograms, the Cabbage Patch Kids, Polly Pocket, Wrestling Buddies. There are so many more. I could spend the entire intro naming the cool things that you have designed, but Stefanie Eskander is joining us today. Stefanie, welcome to Adventures in Collecting.
Thank you so much, Erik and Dave. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
It is the honor is all ours, and we're happy to have you on.
Yes, absolutely.
So before we jump in and start learning about all of the amazing things that you've done for the toy industry, the first thing we like to ask all of our guests is what they're currently collecting or what you're excited about collecting.
That's really a funny question because I'm actually at the point in my life where I'm downsizing my collections. I've been a pretty heavy-duty collector of a myriad of things, not just toys. But a few years ago, we moved to a small townhome, and there wasn't room for a lot of my collections. And so we kind of have slowly been selling them, giving them away, just downsizing. But what I'm currently collecting is I seem to be collecting the toys that I designed, which for various reasons, I have not always had a copy of every toy that I've designed. If I did, it would fill up multiple rooms. But it wasn't as important to me to have those toys, although a lot of them I did have, and I gave them to my own children to play with when they were small. But I seem to have sold off a bunch of them when we downsized, and so now my big job is to try to collect them back. And so I've been going on eBay and Etsy, and then I've got people who are followers of me on Instagram who have generously just sent me things. Oh, you designed that? I'll just send you this thing. So I'll get a box with something in it that I designed, and I'm so grateful for that. So that seems to be the focus of my collecting right now. But I mentioned that I was a serious collector. Back in 2011, I decided to start a blog, and it was called The Copycat Collector. And I decided I was actually inspired by a woman who posted one collection of hers every single day for a year. So I decided to do the same thing. So from July 1st, 2011 to June 30th, 2012, I had a collector blog, which is still there, where I posted a different collection every weekday, so Monday through Friday, and then on the weekend I would post or I would link someone else's collection. And
Wow.
It was, toys and books and pottery and depression glass and musical instruments and all kinds of interesting things. I figured if I had 3 or more of it, it was a collection. And anyway, I got through that year, and the thing that was the most awesome about it was that I was able to photograph almost everything I owned that was a collectible and post it on this blog. And then later, it wasn't long after that we downsized and I got rid of things. I had it documented. So I was really glad that I had spent that year going through everything, seeing what I had, and then posting it so it's out there in cyberland.
Well, keeping a collection of any kind organized is an ordeal. So I mean, that's you're effectively killing two birds with one stone there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, from that time where you were showing off all of the various collections and collectibles, what was your favorite little micro collection there?
That's really a hard question because I collect such a variety of things and I had so many favorites. But I think the thing that was kind of dearest to my heart and something that I've managed to hold on to was I collect vintage school books, children's, elementary school readers, Dick and Jane kind of readers, and primers and workbooks and arithmetic books. Uh, they generally date from the 40s up to the 60s. So even though I'm not quite that old, I did grow up with a lot of these books as a child, and I found certain series of books. It was really important to me to try to finish a series. So there might be a series of Alice and Jerry books, and you try to get the primers and the first grade and the second grade. You try to get all of them up to the sixth grade, which generally was most schools back then were either up to sixth grade or to eighth grade for elementary school. And so I have music books, art books, science books, math books, readers, health books, social studies, geography, and I really kept an awful lot of them. I think a lot of it is the artwork, the beautiful illustrations of children. Most of these, because of the time they were published, it was a more innocent, sweet time. They tend to not be particularly diverse. That was a cultural thing that was pretty prevalent. But as it got up into the 60s, then you'd see more of the books had more of a diverse group of kids in them. I really like the younger books, the first and second grade, kindergarten, those kind of books. The older books are a little bit too wordy and not as many illustrations, so I don't like them as well. But I think those have been really dear to my heart, and I still love to look at them.
I can, close my eyes and envision some of those like covers and like just the kind of, very, plain but well drawn children and, all of those kind of like timeless looks. But speaking about art, and the art in these books, how did you really get into the art of making toys?
Well, actually, I guess you could say it's a really direct relationship because from the time I was a little girl, I knew I was going to be an artist and I wanted to be a children's artist. I wanted to illustrate children's books, and I was a huge reader from the time I was little, and loved picture books, loved storybooks, and I had certain favorite illustrators as a child that I followed them zealously. I mean, I would read the books almost more because of the artwork than because of the story. And so when I went to college, I majored in illustration, and my emphasis was children's illustration, and I started illustrating for children's magazines when I was still in college. And I had no clue about toys as a field. I mean, it never crossed my mind. Nobody ever mentioned that. I didn't think about it. And so when I got out of college, I became an advertising illustrator, and I worked in Los Angeles at one of the biggest advertising agencies in LA. But as time progressed, I started picking up more and more children's work. So I would do the advertising art for Disneyland or Knott's Berry Farm, or I did all the children's menu art for Denny's restaurants and that kind of thing. I had always done a lot of kids work, and then I started doing storyboards for Mattel's ad agency and Tomy Toys ad agency, and that's what led me into the toy industry. So I'd been uh, doing artwork in the early 80s for these Los Angeles toy companies. And then in the fall of 1984, Mattel had a job fair. And I had enough children's art in my portfolio that I just took a chance and went down to this job fair in Hawthorne and interviewed, and they hired me. just like right then. So that's how I began to illustrate or to design toys, and it's a direct relationship from that art that I loved as a child.
So Mattel was the first real toy gig then that you had.
Before I went to Mattel, I actually was freelancing for a company called Small World Toys, which is a small toy company in the Los Angeles area. I had originally been hired to through their advertising agency to do some illustration, some artwork for their boxes for their dolls, a couple of doll lines. And that led me to designing a line of puzzles. You know those wooden puzzles that have the little peg you lift up and
Oh
it's
yeah.
little animals. So I did a line of puzzles for Small World Toys as a freelancer. And so again, because so when I went to Mattel, I did have a little bit of toy product to show them. So those are kind of what I consider my first toy ventures, but Mattel was my first full-time toy gig.
So what was it like taking the experience you had in advertising and like 2D art and translating that into physical objects, 3D things that kids were then playing with?
That is such an excellent question because that was the hardest thing for me. I was a 2D artist. And it's also interesting because the toy industry has changed in a lot of ways since the 80s when I got into it. Back when I went to Mattel, almost all my colleagues were children's illustrators. You know, they had worked for Hallmark or they illustrated children's books or they were, did other kinds of children's products, greeting cards. And so all of us were 2D artists. And all of a sudden I was expected to know how to design play sets and 3D things and learn how to do the kind of drawings that you do. We call them control drawings, but the drawings where you do the front view, the side view, the back view, the top view, all of those views. And I had to learn how to do that. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to do. But you do what you need to learn, right? I mean, if to be a successful toy designer, you have to learn how to design in 3D. You just do it. And there certainly are people who come into the toy industry with more of a product design or an industrial design background. And I think those programs probably lend themselves much more readily to 3D toys. But in my opinion, my illustration background gave me a personal style of drawing and a whimsy and an ability to create characters that really can't be taught. I think you can improve and you can learn things, but I think not every toy designer can do everything, right? And so some people are better at developing characters and faces and that kind of thing. Others are better at doing more of the technical aspects. But for me, I wanted to design the aesthetics and make things cute. I mean, after all, my background was more with typically female type of toys, girls things. I was a girl myself, so I was much more attracted to a style of art that was more girly, and so I just worked really hard. Today, I know students have to learn more 3D programs and things, but that didn't really exist back in the 80s. We were creating three dimensions by drawing two dimensionally.
Well, that was gonna be my next question. You have been uh you've been in the industry, s- you know to the
Oh,
point where everything was by hand and you got to kind of witness the advent of Adobe and InDesign and all of these a Wacom tablet and all of the tools that are now kind of at the hands of digital design. How has technology kind of affected your process personally?
it's actually been awesome. I mean, I can't. Have been amazed how much technology has improved my skills and has enhanced them. Um, that said, not every designer who's of my generation has taken readily to technology, and even with me, it was a struggle. I first became um, aware, I guess, of technology used in design process in the early 90s when I was at Fisher Price. And they had, a lot of skilled CAD designers, that kind of thing, who were working already on computer aided design. But we regular designers were asked to take, uh, they had in-house computer classes for us to take. And it was really hard for me. It just didn't go the way my brain did. And it took me a couple of years. By that time, I'd moved on to Mattel for the second time. I worked for Mattel twice. I went back to Mattel in 1995. So we're talking 95 through 97. Um, I really needed to up my skill level in Adobe products. And so I started in Illustrator and got fairly proficient. And then at the end of 97, I left Mattel and went on my own for the next 12 years and had my own studio at home. And that became really difficult because I couldn't afford to buy a computer. I mean, I was now freelancing, and that was when the iMac first came out. And I got my first computer in 2000. So between 98 and 2000, I used to go down to Kinko's. They had computers you could rent. You could sit in a little office and rent a Mac. And so I would go down there and I would, do whatever little label art or some little thing that I had to do on the computer. And but mostly I was still drawing by hand because I didn't have a computer. Then once I got my computer, and I became pretty proficient in Illustrator and Photoshop, and just continued to develop my skills. And it just enhanced my abilities. But I still primarily drew and draw to this day by hand.
So you mentioned that the industry has changed over the years. How has it really shifted, or how have you seen it shift?
Well, in many ways, it's gotten better. In other words, technology is improved. Things are faster. Communication. I mean, for the first 10 years that I was in the toy industry, we did, we didn't even have email. It was just, we didn't have computers in our offices. Everything was done by hand. You used a blueprint machine, you used a fax machine, you faxed your drawings. We had photocopiers, obviously, but it was uh, it was slower. We didn't have communications with our counterparts in Hong Kong and China. It was tough. Communications really improved. I think to a certain extent, skill level has improved. The aesthetics of toys have changed dramatically, um, both in traditionally boys' toys and traditionally girls' toys. I don't think that there's anybody who can deny that toys, especially action figures and kind of boys' toys, that they've gotten a million times more complex and beautifully done. I mean, they're a lot more realistic, the sculpture. I mean, if you look at an action figure from the 80s and you look at an action figure from 2010 or currently, you're going to see it's like night and day. The complexity and the detail and the talent. Dolls, on the other hand, have changed in different ways. They've gotten more sophisticated looking, maybe a little bit more edgy. Um, they've also gotten less sweet. I'm kind of a old school enough that, I love the era of strawberry shortcake and Care Bears and Rainbow Bright, where, it was a happy world full of flowers and candy and sweet treats and loving hearts and that kind of thing. And it's changed. We have, Monster High, and we have, um,
Bratz dolls.
Yeah. Well, I always say Bratz changed everything. So that's a whole other topic of conversation. And I don't dislike Bratz, and I don't dislike a lot of the edgier products, but I do kind of long for the days of those sweeter, kind of more innocent toys. And I think collectors particularly love those things because they bring back their childhood, their youth. A lot of them, it was escape from maybe an unhappy childhood. Others just loved the feeling that they got by playing with their Care Bears or their Cabbage Patch Kids or whatever it was. And I'm not a sociologist, so I don't know whether today's toys are going to evoke as much emotion as those old toys.
Well, the
Perhaps
good
they
news is
will.
what's old is
What's
new
old is
again,
new,
right?
yeah.
Yes, that's true.
So speaking of some of those properties, you've worked on some iconic pieces of toy history. Popples, Gem and the Holograms, Cabbage Patch Kids, Polly Pocket, and Wrestling Buddies, to name a few.
Uh-huh.
What do you think has been your best work, or what have you kind of enjoyed most from those properties?
Oh, I have enjoyed working on so many lines, but I have to say, hands down, my favorite line to work on was Moon Dreamers by Hasbro. So that was a line that actually I didn't work on the first year of Moon Dreamers. They began in 1986. They were at Toy Fair in 1986, which was the year I arrived at Hasbro. And so when I came on board that same month, February of '86, I was assigned to work on the second year, Moon Dreamers. So I designed all the new Moon Dreamers, and then there were two little Starfinders, and then there were some play sets. However, not a single thing that I designed was ever released. The line was canceled. However, everything was photographed, and it was in catalogs. It was shown, I guess, at Pre-Toy Fair in 1986, or maybe it was 87, for 80. It would have been for Toy Fair 87, and then they canceled the line, probably due to poor sales performance. But Moon Dreamer fans really loved the line, and the aesthetic was charming. They glowed in the dark. They had glow in the dark hair. They had little parts of their outfits that glowed in the dark. They had a wonderful story. There was a cartoon. There was toy. I mean, in addition to toys, there were shirts and lunch boxes and all that stuff. And I'm sad that none of the toys that I designed happened, but I'm grateful that they were beautifully photographed and cataloged. And I do have one of my original renderings left, and um, some photos that I took that show some of the dolls. They're not very good photos. This was the '80s after all, but I've got a few things left. But I loved the line. It was so fun.
Now, you mentioned, like, with something like Gem or something like Moon Dreamers, there was that cartoon aspect that went along with it. Did the cartoon dictate the toy designs, or vice versa more so?
Vice versa. I can't speak to Moon Dreamers because I wasn't involved in the development of the original development. That had happened before I got there. But I did also work on Gem, which was a lot of fun too. I enjoyed working on Gem. With Gem, the cartoon was designed to sell dolls, and that's opposite of most properties. Most properties, it's the cartoon, or the entertainment property is created, and then the toys support the TV show, the movie, whatever it is. But with Gem, it was the opposite. And so, but we as designers, we had nothing at all to do with the cartoon series. We, knew who they were. We knew who our ad agency was, who was working with it. We, had a vague idea that this cartoon was going on, but I wasn't watching it. My kids were too young to watch it at that time. It was pretty sophisticated, and we were busy designing. We didn't have time to sit around and watch cartoons, so I was really ignorant of the series. But Gem fans, generally speaking, all loved the cartoon, probably more than the dolls, although they loved the dolls too. And so when I first kind of got into this world of collectors, it was actually Gem that brought me in. And there was a young man who contacted me probably in about 2011. And he had heard about me because I had posted something on a doll forum about Gem. And so he reached out to me and started asking me a lot of questions. And a lot of the questions that he was asking me about had to do with the cartoon series. And I was kind of sad that I had to tell him that I didn't really know too much about it. But I think it was really tough for the production company to create the series because Hasbro was a little bit closed-mouthed about their products, even to the production company that was doing the cartoons. I think they were afraid of, having their ideas getting into the wrong hands. So they were a little bit tight-lipped, I guess, about communicating. And so, fortunately, the creatives on the Gem show just kind of made up for what they didn't know and created some amazing things. But generally, we drove the cartoon, but you also have to understand that there's a lag time. I mean, it takes a lot longer to develop a toy than it does a cartoon. It takes a long time to do a cartoon. Granted, they were hand drawn, and it's a long process. But manufacturing is even longer, and so anytime you have an entertainment property that has toys to go along with it, the licensor, which is the one who owns the entertainment property, has to cooperate early with their manufacturers to give them all the information that they need. Because you want, if you have a movie, for example, you want the toys to come out just before or at the same time the movie's released. You can't wait till the movie's done and then say, oh, gee, I think we want some toys to go along with it, because toy development takes such a long time. So it's a really tricky and long-term project, and I'm glad I'm not the one who has to make all those decisions.
Well, I think in the over the past 30 years, if a lot has changed, that has been one of the things that continues to be based on some of the conversations we've had with with other people who are in the toy industry. I don't think that problem
It's never
has
been
gone away.
solved. No, I know that's true.
An uncrackable case, if you will. Um, Before we move away from Moon Dreamers, I wanted to ask, there's a long history of toy lines, all over, from various brands, different intellectual properties, of like these mysterious toy lines that go into at least like as far as to have like samples for photography and for adverts, and then they never see the light of day. Do you know what ended up happening to those Moondream dolls that never came out?
No, I wish I knew. Hasbro does have an archive. My instinct is that back in the 80s, they didn't have their act together enough. And I say that in a kind way because, toy companies are their businesses, and their businesses is to always think ahead. They're not thinking about the past, they're thinking about the future. And so my guess is a lot of things got thrown out back in those days, in the 80s and
Ugh.
before. Um, I know that I have one friend who is a sculptor. It was a sculptor at Hasbro for many, many years, and um, probably shortly after Moon Dreamers was, you know, Deep Sixed, he found a beautiful play set in the trash can, and he rescued it and hung on to it and has it, but it was thrown away. So it's possible that those things were destroyed. I would like to think they're in the archives. They do have a wonderful archives. I don't believe that the public can have any access to it unless you have some, you're writing a book or something and you have some special, access, special permission. But I always have the faith that all of those beautiful drawings and all of those little play sets and things that I design are somewhere in a little vault at the Hasbro archives. So the older it is, I think the bigger chance that it's been lost, or there are a lot of people who buy prototypes and employees who spirit them out and sell them. It gets harder. Security is tight in toy companies for obvious reasons, and most toy companies, especially the larger ones, they have a very strict policy about not taking products home. They belong to the company; they don't belong to the designer, the creator. So, um, hopefully, those things are still around. At least we have photos, and in many cases, color copies or whatever, but they're possibly gone forever.
Well, new life goal for me at least. I would love to get into that that vault and see some of that that catalog stuff. Jeez.
Me too.
So we mentioned wrestling buddies, which is something Eric and I definitely both had when we were younger, and it's become like a timeless toy. They've been remade over the years, as have a couple of the other ones that we've mentioned. But what do you think has made them so timeless? And speaking of stuff that never got made, did you have any future designs for the buddies that you would have liked to have seen actually get made?
That's a good question too. It's really interesting because when I was asked to do the artwork for the Wrestling Buddies, that was a big shock to me. Uh, I arrived at Tonka, which in the deep winter of a Minnesota December day, right after Christmas, 1989, and probably my first week there, I was dragged into a meeting of the Boys Toys group, and I was asked to submit some drawings for these wrestling figures. And apparently, the wrestling toys that had been developed, they had come in from an outside inventor. They looked kind of like big nebulous generic wrestlers. They just had big, kind of bald heads, and they were lumpy, and but the form was about the same. They had that funny shape where they're very fat and they're pillow like, and they've got the arms that are down and kind of in it with a clenched fist, little short stubby legs. Um, and I think some of the staff artists at Tonka had made some attempts to capture the faces, and so they asked me if I would do that. And because I was an illustrator, that was my background. I just sat down with a bunch of wrestling magazines, and I uh, drew Hulk Hogan, and the guys and the boys team just went crazy. They loved what I did, and they said, "Okay, we want you to do them." And it was such a shock because I had never done anything like that was kind of guy oriented. And it picking a style, there was nothing to look at that was like that. I mean, I didn't have any reference other than photos of the real guys. I didn't have anything to go by, and so I just had to create a style that seemed to suit the cartoony shape. So, I'm not really a caricaturist, but I thought, at the time I captured them fairly decently. Their character. The first four that I did included, in addition to Hulk Hogan, was the $1 Million Man. I actually thought he was my favorite because I was able to do glitter on him, and being a girl toy designer, I kind of like glitter. And so I was pretty good at painting glitter. So that was kind of fun to put glitter on his, graphic glitter,
I can
not real glitter.
I can almost hear Ted DiBiase like, did they put glitter on me?
Yeah, we got lots of glitter on you, Ted. So anyway, I created these first four characters, and Tonka was a small enough company that I was quite close to the whole design team, including upper management. And they dragged me back to Stamford, Connecticut, gosh, 4 or 5 times, I think, to meet with the executives at Titan to, show them my designs, to get approval. And I got to meet Vince McMahon, and, I think there was a wrestler or two that came through while I was there. And it was just kind of really fun. I mean, I got to do this that was a totally different style. Like I said, I had no reference. I had nothing. Nowadays there are wrestling. They all kind of um, built off the characters that I did. I mean, sometimes I look at them and I say, "Oh, I could have done that better. Maybe I should have worked a little harder." But on the whole, it's pretty iconic. And honestly, I don't know why it became such a hit. When we first created it. So, my story is that the wrestling buddies were ready. They wanted to show them at Toy Fair in 1990. I arrived at the end of December. Toy Fair is in the middle of February. That gave us 6 weeks to design, create, prototype, photograph, do a commercial, and, print all of the catalogs and everything else. And so that's not very much time. And
No.
so uh, at the time I was being relocated. So my husband and kids were still in Rhode Island, where Hasbro is. I'd been at Hasbro before that. And so I was at a hotel staying nearby, and I remember in the evening just sitting on the hotel bed, hand markering using I used alcohol-based markers, these big white wrestlers, and I would be hand drawing them. And then we did have a staff of other designers who later were able to color my artwork. I would do all the line art, and then they would color them, but I had to do the first prototypes. And so we got it all done for Toy Fair, and actually, it was only a modest hit at Toy Fair. It was one of those kind of things that, the marketing guys and the head of design, they all thought it was going to be a big hit, but it was just kind of a modest success. But somehow, between Toy Fair in February and the fourth quarter, when the big sales happened, it kind of became a big hit, and it got a lot of press. It kind of flew off the shelves. Maybe not as much as Cabbage Patch Kids had, but it was a pretty hot toy, and that was my first experience with being involved with a hot toy. So that was exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you asked, kind of in your description there, like how they ended up being so successful. And I mean, I know Dave and
I
we both had them.
I'll outright
Um,
speak to it. My wrestling
yeah,
buddy is 7 years younger than me, so to actually have you know something that is more of like kind of you had two options. You would wrestle around with like a sibling, or you would find like a reasonable facsimile, like sort of pillow or something along those lines. So it was kind of like that happy medium where it's like, okay, this is actually like a real wrestler. I get to feel like a real wrestler.
That is so true. But being a girl, that wasn't how I played. We talk in the toy industry about play patterns, and that rough and tumble play pattern isn't what I was used to. I was used to nurturing and dress up and role playing and that kind of thing. And so it was a little bit different for me. But my own boys loved wrestling buddies, and especially my younger son. I have a photo in my book of him with my one of my prototypes of Hulk Hogan taken, probably like in March or April of 1990. And he's, I think he was 5 at the time. And just that grin on his face that he loved that wrestler. And to this day, he still loves his wrestling buddy. We don't have that prototype anymore, but he has a few
y-
in his collection.
yeah. I mean, mine was the Ultimate Warrior. That was the one that I loved. But the thing that for me that was really cool about it was I got to play with it all day and then sleep with it at night. Like you couldn't
Yeah.
go to bed with one of your action figures. You'd wake up with like scratches and bruises and stuff.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you could body slam Ultimate Warrior and then effectively sounds weird saying it now as a grown man, but like you could cuddle with the warrior and go to bed.
Well, actually, I think that that's a really valid observation, and I think that it tapped into a play pattern that boys would have that I think was unexpected. Because traditionally, other than preschool kinds of things where you might have you know, a a stuffed dog or a stuffed bear. I think, especially as boys got a little bit older and maybe they didn't want to have a stuffed animal, a stuffed bear in their bedroom because that was wussy. To have a wrestling buddy that they could then put on their bed and hug it at night. Was kind of an untapped play pattern for little boys, and I think it was really awesome. And I'm so glad to have been a part of that because I don't think I would have recognized that had I just continued solely doing dolls and other girls' toys.
And it was a way to we have a roughhouse nature to do that, but not get hurt or not hurt anybody. That also was something that was,
Hmm, that's a
I'm
good point.
sure, very, very attractive to the idea.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that that's
because just like
true.
the wrestler on TV, you'd pound your wrestling buddy, and he'd effectively get back up and be unharmed.
Yeah, and they were made really well. The fabric that we used, I mean, I was involved with testing fabrics and the printing of the fabric, and We wanted them to be able to withstand a lot of play. They were, if you were to take them apart, you'd see extra little gussets that were sewn in, like under the arms, so that they wouldn't tear. So that, and technically you could just throw them in the washing machine. I think a lot of kids didn't do that, and their buddies got pretty dirty, but they could be washed in the machine and maybe in a pillowcase and stuff. So they were pretty durable, and I think they've stood the test of time.
So David mentioned too, if there was anything else that was kind of, in that buddy world, and you recently posted a picture of Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk buddies, which I had actually never seen before.
Yeah, I've never quite understood why they weren't big sellers. I think, but you guys have tapped on to possibly the reason, and that's that the wrestling buddies are meant to wrestle, and the kids wrestle with them. I don't think maybe kids didn't want to wrestle with Spider-Man. I'm not sure what it was, but yeah, they were called Marvel Power Pals, and we designed 2 characters, Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk, and I did the artwork for those as well as for the wrestling buddies. And I think they sold okay. They weren't blockbuster hits. I haven't had too many people contact me to ask for additional information or tell me that they love them. Doesn't mean they didn't. I just haven't really heard from any fans of them. But I think they're kind of cool. I have my original prototype of my Spider-Man in my office, and I have all my original drawings from them. I don't have all of my original drawings for the first 4. The first year that we did it, which was Hulk and Ted DiBiase and Ultimate Warrior and
It would have been Macho King.
Macho Man. Yeah, Macho King.
Yeah.
Right. So I did those 4, and I don't have my original drawings from those. But I do have my original drawings from Jake the Snake and Big Boss Man, and I did have my original prototype of Big Boss Man, but I sold it to a collector for a vast sum of money.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. I really hated I don't do it to sell these things because in my mind, once they're gone, they're gone. But he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, so I did sell that. But I photographed everything, so there you go.
So you've mentioned several times that the focus of your career kind of leaned into the world of dolls and the demographic of girls' toys. Was there ever an action figure line or a quote unquote boys' toys line that you found attractive and really wanted to work on?
I can't think of a property I wanted to work on, but there are 2 categories of kind of traditionally boys' toys that I really love. One is robots, and I draw a lot of robots, and then monsters. Now, I have to say, I tend to draw cute monsters, but I do like and appreciate monster characters and robotic or space characters. And so I think I collect the little tin Japanese robots, and I love them. I love them more than many of the dolls that I've done. I just love their faces and the way they look, and that they're made out of tin, and a lot of them walk and they wind up, and so I've created a lot of robot art in through the years, and so I think it would have been fun to have worked on a robot line. And then as far as monsters go, I really loved My Pet Monster, and
Oh yeah.
they were created
Yeah.
by Amtoy, which was a division of American Greetings. American Greetings had their character development group was called Those Characters from Cleveland, and that group was the ones who came up with a lot of American Greetings iconic toys, and so they came up with the idea for My Pet Monster. And I think that would have been a super fun line to work on. I like the idea of it being soft and cuddly, but still ugly and funky. And so that would have been attractive to me.
Eric,
he
you
had
have
that
the
awesome
the football one, right?
Yep, he had the football helmet. He had that awesome like corduroy
Yes,
nose.
yes, corduroy nose.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
plastic chains, handcuffs and chains.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. He had the big chains with the cuffs on it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I did have the football one. So mine, you could squeeze his big old head into a plastic football helmet.
So Stephanie, you recently self-published a book, and I think we saw on Instagram there's a second edition coming out.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about it.
Back in 2019, when I was getting ready to be a guest at the My Little Pony convention, which is called Pony Fair, I decided, because by this point, I'd been doing my Instagram for about a year and a half, my toy Instagram. I decided to write a book because when I share on my Instagram, I don't just post a picture of something I designed and said, I designed this. I like to tell stories, like a certain aspect about the toy, maybe a little bit of background, something interesting that people can read. And I just realized that what I wanted to do was share stories. I didn't want to share the technical details. I didn't want to share sales or, any kind of consumer information, just kind of the story about the development of a toy, whether it was released or not. So I decided to do this book. So I was really motivated to get it done so that I could have books to sell at this convention, and I did. I got it done. It's not a very big book. It's only 56 pages, but it's chock full of, I don't know how many hundreds of photographs and illustrations, drawings, pictures from my notebooks, all kinds of stuff. And so when I did that, I just kind of realized that I had a lot more stories, but I didn't really want to write a, volume two. So what I decided to do was expand my book. And so my book is called Toy Stories: The Secret Life of a Toy Designer. I have to credit my husband Bruce for coming up with that. Thought it was pretty clever. And what I decided to do was make the book twice as big and tell twice as many stories. So it really, even though it's twice as long, it seems like it's three times as interesting. So although I kept all of the pages that I have in my original book, I really added a lot of interesting things. I did add a few pages about the wrestling buddies and stories about that, but I expanded into a lot more toys that I had done that were successful, not released, technology, collecting, all kinds of interesting things, not just about the individual toys, but about, what it was like for my kids to grow up as kids in the toy industry, what it was like to live in certain place, what it was like to, because we moved a lot. I think 7 or 8 times, and I worked for 9 different toy companies, and so it's been kind of an adventure. We've moved a lot and uh, gone from California to Rhode Island to Minnesota to Western New York, back to Los Angeles, then to New Jersey and New York, and then to Utah. So that's a lot of moves. So I try to cover all kinds of interesting things. So this one it's got the same cover, except it says it's the twice as fun edition. And right now it's done, but it's in the editing process. So my editor is proofreading it for me, and I'm hoping that I'll get it to the printer within the next week or two. It probably won't be ready till right after Christmas, but it's possible it will be ready at Christmas time. Of course, that doesn't matter. It's probably going to be too late for anybody to give it as a Christmas present, but I'm really excited for this new volume, and I think it'll be a lot of fun.
I feel like one of those things as a collector, and also having the opportunity to speak to a decent sized gathering of other collectors, is that it's kind of this instant gratification thing, right? Like you see, especially now, back then, like I remember flipping through like the Sears holiday catalog and like even like the J.C. Penney holiday catalog and like circling the toys that I wanted for Christmas, right?
Hmm.
But now there's a toy reveal happens, and then 2 hours later it's up for pre-order, and 3 weeks later it's showing up at your at your house, from Amazon, or sometimes even directly from a manufacturer like Hasbro. So it's kind of become this thing of like instant gratification, And I personally feel like that a lot of people who collect don't truly know the the process, right? Like
The joy of the hunt.
from well, not even just the joy of the hunt, but like how that toy that you're now holding in your hands got there.
That's an interesting thing because Instagram is really how I've communicated with the collecting community. And people message me. I've gotten to be friends with a lot of these people. And one of the things that I hear a lot is people say, wow, until I saw the things that you were posting, I had no idea how that kind of thing was done. You know, I think people just, a lot of things, you see them at a store and you just think, oh, it's just magic. Um, right? It's like, who designs doorknobs? It's nothing is created by nothing. Everything has to be created by someone. And unless you're involved in a creative and, a product like that, people don't have a clue. And I'm sure there's things that I have no clue about what went into the creation of them, but I try really hard through my stories and my adventures to kind of give people what a feeling of how toys are designed and developed and what the process is, because it isn't instantaneous. It takes a long time. I mean, your average plastic molded toys takes for a year to 2 years to development. I mean, there's a lot of variables in it. Soft goods, what we call fabric or plush, those kind of things, even doll fashions, can be created much faster because they don't have to make molds. You can sew them up. They can, make the patterns to sew them up, and those can go faster. But anything that's got plastic on it has to be molded, and the molds can take weeks and months to make. And then, most toys today are manufactured in China, and they don't fly those toys back to the United States. They put them on a ship, and that can take weeks to get there. And so there's no instantaneous, the toy comes off the assembly line and you get it two days later. It's a long, arduous process to get a toy and to time it right so that it comes out just at the right time with enough weeks before, Christmas or whatever the selling season is that you're, summertime, if you're having, outdoor activity toys, you don't want to be releasing those in December unless you're in Australia. That you want those to come out in the spring. So the timing is everything, and it is a long process.
Well, speaking of Instagram and people asking questions, we posted an Instagram story a couple days ago announcing that we were going to be interviewing you, and we got a couple of good questions. Do you want to take a swing at some of them?
Okay, I'm scared, but let's let's see how I do.
All right. So the first one here, this comes from @huntingnostalgia on Instagram. Do you have a special toy that inspired you to become a designer?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. Um, I think it's kind of funny that I ended up being primarily a doll designer because I wasn't really a dolly kind of girl. I had a Barbie. I had my first Barbie I got when I was, about the time Barbie came out. It was pretty new when I got it. And I had another fashion doll, and when I was really little, I had some baby dolls, but I wasn't really, um, a doll person. So I never had the desire to create like the kind of dolls that I played with or anything like that. I My very favorite toy as a child was a kaleidoscope, and I've often thought, how is it that I went from loving this kaleidoscope with all these myriad pieces of glass in it, forming all these patterns? What is that made me want to design products? I think combined with my love of illustration, I love pattern, I love symmetry, I love color, and I love creating faces and characters. And so I can't speak to a particular toy, but I think those influences of that early childhood art and a few toys and games that I played with as a child just helped me to understand how a child can be fascinated by pattern and color, and I wanted to recreate that.
So speaking of color, we have a couple of color palette questions.
Oh no.
First one, this is from at Zardaw's Hologram. Do you come up with the color palette when you're designing a toy, or are there guidelines given?
Ah, that's a good question. There's two very diametrically opposed answers to that question. If you're working with a licensed property, such as a Disney character, a character from a movie or a book, a Nickelodeon character TV show, you are given the colors to work with. They create these licensors create style guides, and these style guides the toy designers have to follow. You have if you're going to do, you know, a Disney princess, for example, you have to follow the style guide. You use the colors that they prescribe. So, needless to say, that's not my favorite way to design. Um, in the other toys that I design, generally, I like to pick colors myself, and I've been pretty successful in having my employer go along with my color choices. I think color is an area that I've been pretty strong in. It's kind of one of my favorite things to do, and so I really like to come up with colors, and usually that my boss or whoever the upper management team that's looking at the designs, I haven't had too many times where they've asked me to change colors. We may have to eliminate a color or two. We may have to reduce it to save money, for example. But I've been pretty successful at doing color, and I really love to create toys that I can come up with the color palettes. One of the really interesting things about color is that color choices for toys has changed through the years. The popular colors of the 80s may be different from popular colors of today. And so, we designers have to keep up to date with color trends, what kids like, um, and always stay on top of things, like, teal comes and goes, right? You've got there are some colors that are they consider them the kiss of death, but that color might change. There was one time when designing with green was considered kind of a no-no, and then other times green has been a very popular color. As you probably know, pink has been a popular color for girls for decades. But when I was a little girl, you almost never saw pink. Most girls' toys back then were red. Red was a really popular color. A lot of um, dolls. The original Barbies had almost no pink in the Barbies. That Barbie pink came much later. So you look at the original fashions for Barbie, and there was black and red and navy blue and checks and different, much more sophisticated color palette. So color fashion changes, and so you kind of need to keep up with fashionable colors.
Yeah, it's funny. All of those, my as I told you before we started recording, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she's now playing with some of my wife's toys and mine too, but from when we were kids. And it's funny because like my wife busted out all of her Polly Pockets, and like she has a combination of like some of those Bluebird
Oh yeah, those are
Polly
great.
Pockets, like the
The
pre-Mattel
original
ones,
ones.
and yeah, and then she has some of the Mattel ones. But it's crazy because hearing you talk about all these colors, it's like you crack one of those things open and it's like a muted yellow, teal, pink,
Yes.
white. And that's
Yes,
pretty much it.
very, very late 80s, early 90s kinds of colors.
I was gonna say
But
you're talking to somebody whose favorite color is purple, so it's I on my end I never really other than like Macho Man Randy Savage, I never had any purple toys.
Purple is actually, kind of a masculine color if used right. You'll see purple added to with blue or black or red in guys' products. But of course, with pink or aqua or something, it's much more girly. Or if it's lavender, colors can be very subtle. Just a slight shift in how much red or how much blue is mixed into a color really makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I mean, purple, man. Donatello had a purple bandana. The
That's true.
Undertaker had purple. There was purple in
The
some guys
Joker.
stuff. Yeah, the
Yep,
Joker, of course.
right,
How did I forget
of
about the
course.
Joker? Um, so the last question that we have from our Instagram, you actually answered one of them. So one of the one of the questions was what goes into color choices and how has it changed over the years. So you rolled right into that one as if you
I
knew it was
must be
coming.
psychic. I'm psychic.
The last question comes from at a wild Katie appeared. I like that name. I think it's a Pokemon reference. Um, do you do any freelance drawing or consulting work now?
I still design toys. Um, I do, yeah, I mean, I do all kinds of stuff. I was at Toy Fair this year. I uh, met with some people. I still do some inventing. I'm not as active in pursuing projects because, I'm kind of to a point in my career where I'm really enjoying this storytelling thing, this sharing, and I want to be able to pursue my own projects. I do a lot of artwork, particularly kids art, that, I want to have more time to do that for myself, but I still do quite a bit of toy design work. So yes,
Is there anything in particular you're working on right now that you were at liberty to talk about?
I wish I could tell you, but they're really not. The toy world is very secretive, and in fact, the whole idea of me writing a book and sharing my stories on Instagram was really went against my nature because in the toy world, like a lot of product or entertainment, everything is very confidential. We sign non-disclosure agreements. We have to keep things confidential. And, kind of the rule of thumb has always been if your toy is released, you can talk about it. Until it's released, you can't.
Yep.
But things that were unreleased kind of were in limbo because well, they might come out. The company you did it for still owns that property. So I'd been reluctant to talk about it. In fact, as I started doing my Instagram, my husband would come in and look at something that I'd post and he'd say, I never knew that you did that. When did you do? I mean, he would see things because I never talked about it. And so, because of that, I'm not used to sharing and I'm not used to getting credit for stuff because, like, unlike the movie industry or TV industry, there's no credit that rolls at the end of the toy that says, "Oh, this was designed by Stephanie. This was engineered by John. This was, blah blah blah." We don't get credit, and we don't expect it. I don't. I never went into this field because I wanted any glory, and so um, I was a reluctant sharer. And so I've kind of had a rule of thumb that I don't share anything that's less than, say, 5 years old. I mean, that's less than 5 years old. So we moved to Utah in 2016. So I have not shared a single project that I did since then. So that's been, I guess, 4 years. And
It's like
go ahead.
my father-in-law has a history of working for like government agencies. And it's funny because like he always makes a joke like I've been to places that don't exist. And
Right.
and the more and more I talk, Dave and I get a chance to talk to toy people, it's it's
It's the
like wow,
same thing.
the lockdown on
Yeah.
like the next wave of Batman figures. It's like DOD level of security here. Crazy.
Right. And so I had to be really careful. I've been pretty open about a lot of things on my Instagram because it's Instagram. It's kind of temporary. It's not temporary, but it's not like people from Hasbro are going to be going on there and making sure that I didn't talk about something I designed in 1987. But I've tried to be in my book. I tried to be a little bit more careful because I'm getting into published things, where it's going to be out there, right? So I try to be careful, but I am also realistic enough to realize that a property that was done for a toy company, back in the year 2000, if it wasn't produced, chances are anything that I did is not going to be giving away any company secrets, right? Any trade secrets. So, my policy has always been I don't name names and I don't dish dirt. So in my book or in my Instagram, unless I have permission, I never share names of colleagues. People want to know, well, who did this or who did that? I just don't think that that's right for me to out anybody. If people want to be out there in the public and let people know that they designed a particular thing, then that's their job. It's not mine. And then I never speak ill of an employer or a line or anything because for the most part, there's not a lot of ill to speak. It's been an awesome, awesome career. I've had um, wonderful colleagues, wonderful experiences. I've been really lucky. I don't think there's too many designers in the toy business who've worked for as many companies as I have. People tend to work for one or two. There's a little moving around. You might work at Hasbro and Mattel. I've known several people who've done that, but I don't think I've known anybody who's worked for 9 like I have. So that's quite a lot, and there's a lot of properties. So it makes it fun because I have kind of a different point of view. I didn't spend 40 years designing Barbie, right? I spent 35 years designing for all kinds of stuff. So it's been really an awesome opportunity, and I love to share and tell my stories.
Okay. Before we wrap up, we have our last question that we always ask everybody. What's the strangest and or most precious piece in your collection?
Toy or other collection? I should probably ask that.
Let's do toy. Let's stick with toy.
You know what? I collect vintage toy typewriters. And I don't like to type. I was never one who wanted to go to secretarial school or anything like that, but I love my toy typewriters. They're all they're tin. They're made out of tin. They're mostly from the 40s and 50s. They have the coolest graphics and the coolest colors and designs. I told you about how toys had a lot of red back then, so they're like red and black and green. They're not girly colors at all. And so I have to say, it may not be that strange, but I don't know too many people who collect toy typewriters, so I'm going with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've gotten a couple of really, really interesting answers from people for that question. We've gotten everything from now toy typewriters to even though the question was about toys, it somehow ended up on a plague mask. So like one of those like like the big with like the big nose. Yeah, like one of those plague doctor masks. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Toy typewriters. And typewriters are like such a feat of engineering even now. Like
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're a work of art. I mean, if you look at an old regular typewriter from, say, the 30s or 40s, it's like art,
oh yeah.
beautiful lines, and there's just it's such, and of course it's very archaic. We do type with our keyboards, but you put a kid in front of a regular typewriter and they would be baffled. Why do I have to push this so hard? And
Oh, and by the way, don't mess up.
yeah, oh
Otherwise, you'd
please
have to
don't.
start over.
Yeah, there's no undo key or delete key.
Well, Steph, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight on this episode. This was fantastic. Before we let you go, please tell our audience, where can we find you on the internet?
I have a website, and it features not only toy design, but illustration, fine art, photography. I do kind of a lot of things. So it's StefanieEskanderDesign.com. And my name is spelled with an F, so make sure you don't spell it with a PH. I'm on Instagram. I have an Instagram account called Steph Designs Toys. STEF. And I also have an Instagram that I started not too long ago called Steph Collects Stuff. So that's got some of my collections on it. I don't have a lot of entries yet. But it's kind of fun to see a variety of things that I collect. And also, if you're interested in my collector blog, that's at copycatcollector.blogspot.com. Just like it sounds, copycatcollector.blogspot.com. And then that has up to date. I occasionally update it, like once a year, just to keep it active. But I did post things every day for a year, and I think it's really fun to go back through the history of it and see some of the different things I collected.
Amazing. I was actually unaware of the Steph Collects Stuff Instagram, and I just hit that follow button. So
Awesome. I'll be looking.
Steph, thank you again so much for being on Adventures in Collecting, and you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, guys. It was really fun to talk to you.
Thank you, dear listener, for hanging out with us today. Subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen, and then tell your friends to do it. Thanks also to Joe Azzari, the golden voice behind our intro. Our music is Game Boy Horror by the Zombie Dandies. Find more about them both in our show notes.
Follow us on social media at AIC_podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Stop by and say hi, show us your toy hauls, and share your toy stories. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode.
Don't try this at home. Void where prohibited and some assembly required. Each sold separately, not a flying toy. Consult a physician if your toy run exceeds more than 4 hours.
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer, Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.